As we look at human-centered design, one of the most fundamental things we can do right up front is to have a completely new understanding of the problem that we're facing. And so this problem reframe stage is a very essential pivoting point so that we can get energy to generate new ideas. Our human-centered design program runs over several days. What was typically delivered in person in a classroom over 16 hours is now delivered across a work week, can be as compressed as 3 days, or stretched out over 5 to 7 days. We have several installments of about 2 hours each, which is just manageable to be able to work through some content and to do some exercises together. We find in a remote context this works really well. So this problem reframing, or what we call innovation challenges, comes sort of midway into the program, and it really follows our design thinking process. We started off with empathizing, truly getting an understanding of the customer, and at some point we have to stop that process and start to sort of synthesize that information and say what's really going on here. And so this second step in the design thinking process, this problem reframe process, is really about converging in on what we think are the primary areas that we need to be working on. And it is that sort of definition of the problem that really launches us forward as we try and generate some new solutions. And I think about the traffic police and how they try and keep us on the roads following the speed limits. One of the challenges with this being effective is that we are focusing on penalizing errant behavior. In other words, all the solutions that are out there are about how do we penalize those people that exceed the speed limit. What this approach does is it provides a definition of the problem, which is that people need some kind of penalty to get them to change their behavior. But there's an entire frame of other possibility that we are completely ignoring. And what design thinking asks us to do is to try and open up our minds to sort of explore what the other possibilities may be. I use 2 examples of problem reframes that really opened up the possibility to radically new ideas. The first one is Melody Road. It's from Japan, and this is a really interesting idea that they used in a rural area in Japan where they cut grooves into the asphalt on the road, and so as the car moves, the tire hits those grooves and it actually makes a melody when people are following the speed limit, which in this instance is 40 kilometers an hour. And so that moving through this stretch of road, people are actually encouraged to follow the speed limit and to hear this melody. So instead of being penalized for exceeding the speed limit, they are actually being rewarded by having this opportunity to hear this melody. The second example is a speeding lottery. And this example says, well, we might penalize people for exceeding the speed limit, but what if we actually rewarded people who did follow the speed limit? And so what they do here is they take everybody's speeds, and those people that are following the speed limit have their image of their registration captured, and that information goes into a lottery draw. The folks that are exceeding the speed limit are then penalized in the normal fashion, and that becomes the lottery pool. And so people are truly encouraged on this stretch of road to follow the speed limit because they have a chance of winning this bounty. So these are 2 examples which are very different to the kind of interventions that we see when we try and get people to follow the speed limit. They are rewarding good behavior. It is a reframing of the problem. The problem says, oh, we should penalize people when they exceed the speed limit because that's the most effective way to get people to change their behavior. But perhaps there's a more effective way, and that is that if we gave people some kind of positive reinforcement if they actually followed the speed limit. And so this is the power of the reframe. An important element of reframing is that we frame the question. And we call this a how might we question. It's very, very powerful to create these sentences and to start with this question of how might we. And basically what we're doing is we're articulating our challenge from a human perspective, and we're saying, what if we went in this particular new direction? How might we create a solution in this particular area? And so really these how might we should sort of fling the doors open to new ideas and new possibilities. And that's the sort of the mid step, which we do in design thinking that often we don't do within a brainstorming context. Here's a couple of examples of problem reframe. This is from Van Moof. They are in the bicycle business. They send bicycles all over the world to people who buy them. The problem is that they get damaged in the process. And so their reframe was not to say, how can we make the package more sturdy or sort of resistant to any kind of manhandling. They said, how can we make the shipment handlers feel that they're actually working with a fragile item? And if you see the solution, it's a very simple solution of a packaging which has the image of a smart TV on the front. And so as the handlers are carrying this package, they are thinking perhaps this is a very fragile smart TV that they have in their hands, and of course they want to handle it with care. They put an image of a bicycle there and are very clear about the fact that this is a bicycle, and yet somehow some instinct kicks in, and the handlers sort of definitely are going to treat this with a little bit more care than the other item. Another example, this is from an emergency room in the US, and this guy, he's trying to understand what's it like to go through the emergency room experience and how can we make that better. And of course, to make it better, we would normally say, well, make the waits shorter, make it a painless experience for this particular patient. But of course, these are not always solutions that are available to us. And so the insight that this team came up with was the fact that this poor guy is sort of lying on his back, staring up at the ceiling, and that whole process is actually gives him too much time to think about what's really going on with his body. And so we say, how might we distract this patient from the stress of their condition? Completely a new realm for us to explore about how do we put his mind somewhere else so that he's not obsessing with the condition that he's currently going through. And that really opens up a whole realm of possibility in terms of what they may do with things on the ceiling, television sets. In fact, in this example, they even had a small sort of like side mirror that allowed him to see who was coming and going as he was receiving his care. Third example, this is from an NGO called Visionspring. They conduct eye clinics for young children, particularly in rural areas. And their problem was that nobody wanted to come for these eye clinics. And they said, how might we create more engagement for kids? So it's not about providing better care, but really to sort of engage the children in the process. And so the solution, the radical solution that they came up with was that the kids themselves administered this eye test for one another. And so it became a sort of fun activity. It wasn't just that they were sort of a patient in this context. They themselves felt that they were contributing, and it took their minds away from what this might have been a sort of intimidating or scary thing for them. So these framings really sort of help to give us an impetus to explore something in a very new way. Now, getting the framing right can be quite challenging. Sometimes we make the mistake of making the framing a bit too broad. We simply use how might we, and we say how might we encourage kids in rural areas to take an eye test. It's still very broad. I've got no hint as to how to actually go about solving that. Or I make the statement far too narrow, which doesn't give me any room to move. So I say, how might we get the kids involved in the eye test? And really that is an idea in itself. The real art of the how might we statement is that it's somewhere in between. It opens up some kind of possibility. It gives me a clue as to the direction of where the solution might be without dictating what that solution might be. And really this is one of these areas where I feel, practice really helps us get this right. So here's our last example, and this is a case study from the Good Kitchen that we follow all the way through our program. And remember, this case study was all about that the elderly felt bad about themselves being associated with this meal service. And so our problem reframe in this instance could be something like, how might we make a meal experience that makes people feel special? So rather than making them feel sort of down about their situation and that they're receiving some kind of community handout, rather to sort of lift them up in some way. And so you can imagine the many ideas that could come out of that. And of course, the final idea that they actually did execute was this idea of making it feel like a cafe where the recipients of this service felt like customers. They had menus, and it really was sort of an uplifting meal experience for them. There could have been many other reframes, actually. So things like, how might we make the elderly feel special, which we've just discussed, or how might we involve the elderly in this meal service? That would have been a very interesting direction, that this is about them contributing ideas and maybe recipes and even their own labor in the process, and feeling that they've contributed to a community meal. Or how can we create social connection? We know that social is a very important aspect to people's lives, no matter what your life stage. And this would be a great opportunity for this to be about meeting people. And so we could have pushed that direction in terms of this particular solution. So all of these helping to create a reframe of our understanding of what the real problem is. And of course, the reframe is a convergence. It's about making some choices. We have to pick a couple of those statements to sort of ideate and find new ideas. And of course, that's the next stage. So the next stage is then idea generation. So once again, we start to diverge, but we diverge within the context of the problem reframe. So that's innovation challenges. That's part of our design thinking program. We have several other modules that follow pretty much the design thinking process. If you're interested in hearing about the work that we've been doing in design thinking, take a look at invitroinnovation.com. We've got several case studies of our clients. We've been working in this area for 8 years. Or if you're interested in how we deliver our program remotely, take a look at everywhereinnovators.com.